Black patriarch.
Well, good evening. This is T West, and welcome to AfroSynergy News. This program is African Americans' National Political Agenda. That's right. You need that as a people. When you start talking about a national platform and you start talking about what are your demands, you need a national political agenda.
The sophomore season of Snowfall continues the fascinating story of the rise of the crack cocaine epidemic and its huge impact on culture.
I think it speaks closely to a lot of things that are happening today, particularly with the opioid crisis which is going on right now, which is seen as a health crisis,
The president's view isn't shared by Black Americans.
Our next guest also sees things differently. Antonia Okafor is a correspondent with the Independent Journal Review. She joins us right now from Dallas. Good morning to you, Antonia.
Good morning.
Any Nigerian or any African you see excelling, there was no road paid for them. A lot of them are first generations or second generation. So you just saw your parents work so hard and just doing what they know to do, and now they're exposed you to all these opportunities. So whenever I see, another African especially, I'm just like, you better do it. Yes, put us on the map, because why not? Like, it's just so exciting for me.
So, I'm going to suggest a national agenda right now. So get ready. Invite your friends, because this is going to be straight and right to the point. When you start talking about a national platform and you start talking about what are your demands, you need a national political agenda. Now, who has provided you all with that?
I would say that the key issues that we have to address as we move forward is, number one, we got to deal with the mass incarceration crisis. Number two, we have to deal with the economic inequality issue. Number three, we have to deal with educational problems. Number four, we have to deal with urban violence. And those are the things that are really kind of at the top of the priority list when you talk about the black agenda. Everybody wants to say that there is no black agenda. Well, that's a damn lie. We've been talking about a black agenda for many, many years now. And anybody who says, oh, there is no black agenda, there are really people who don't want there to be a black agenda. There is kind of a concerted effort to characterize black people as being disorganized, undisciplined, and disinterested in their own progress.
a black agenda, I am in agreement with Reverend Sharpton on this, that just because you have a black agenda does not mean that you have to demand that the president name it the black agenda. I think that when you also talk about President Obama, whom I've been supportive of as well as critical of, depending on the situation, you have to really make sure that your critiques are objective. And I think that at the end of the day, when you talk about the black agenda, there are three key areas that we have to focus on: education, economics, mass incarceration in the criminal justice system.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Ever so often, we like to invite thoughtful people onto our show to talk about the things people in the African American community are talking about. And folks are talking about President Obama and his obligation, or not, to acknowledge and address a black agenda in this country. Here to talk about it is Will Leveist, Director of Community Outreach and Development with the Urban League of Hampton Roads, Dr. Carol Pretlow, Associate Professor of Political Science at Norfolk State University, and one of our staples here on Another View, community activist Bill Thomas. Welcome to the program, everybody. How you doing?
Thank you.
Good. Okay, I want to kick it off right off the bat. Will, do we have a black agenda, and if so, what is it?
Well, we absolutely, somebody better have a black agenda. It's a matter of who should it come from? Should it come from the president, or should it come from the leaders in the community? And I know from the standpoint of the Urban League, our national president, Mark Morial, was absolutely one of the individuals who met with the president. The Urban League has a program and a set of programs that actually address, and initially was founded 100 years ago as we celebrate our anniversary, to focus on those issues concerning the African American community. So absolutely, is the leaders who are most focused on the issues and culturally the ones that should have.
But what are the issues, Carol? I mean, what if you say the black agenda, what does that mean?
Well, you know, I don't think that agenda is very separate from America as a whole. I think you're talking about employment, education, the environment, I call them the 3 E's. And it is, I agree with you in part and disagree with in part, because I think it comes basically from the ground up, but it takes a president and a Congress to implement them.
But Bill, well, first, do you agree there is one?
There should not be one, there is not one, and we should work toward being Americans.
African American leaders discuss politics and the Obama administration. The event is moderated by PBS commentator Tavis Smiley. From the Chicago State University, this is about 3 hours and 40 minutes.
Today's conversation is really about, as I said earlier, an African American agenda. Whether or not there ought to be one, how it is that we engage one and advance one, that is to say, an African American agenda in the era of Obama. How do we advance an African American agenda in the era of Obama? And how do we do that in what many are calling a post-racial America? What about a black agenda in the era of Obama in a so-called post-racial America?
Putting together the agenda doesn't solve the problem. You have to really dig down. Each one of the items on the agenda, how are we going to move it forward? What does it mean? What's underneath it? What's going to be the plan? And that's what we did when we put together the Covenant with Black America. We took the big issues like health, but we did a drill down and said, but what will it mean in our communities? How do we deal with the disparities? How do people even get into the situation we're in? What's happening in their environments that's leading to asthma and obesity and heart disease?
Anytime you talk about black folk in America, you're talking about a state of emergency, especially for black poor and working people. So that when you talk about love, you're making it a priority to say, America, keep track of the prison-industrial complex, keep track of the dilapidated housing, keep track of the disgraceful school systems, keep track of the unemployment rates and underemployment rates and unavailable health care, child care. That is what it means to talk about a black agenda.
And so when you see money going from the poor to the wealthy, when you see us not dealing with the issues of distribution, when you see young people being locked out of higher education, when the average young person is graduating with about $24,000 worth of student loans, and our young African Americans with $28,000 worth of student loans, when automobiles you can get them at 0% interest, but young people are paying 5 to 25% interest on their student loans, we are setting up a condition where in one generation, Tavis, among black and brown young people anyway, we will see a reduction of the young people coming to higher education, and that does not mean the death of black America. That means, based on demographic shifts, the death of America.
In Chicago, 3,200 black Americans die a year from health disparity. More die a year in this city from health care disparity than in the 9/11 terrorist attack 10 years ago. Obviously, those in the most pain must have some priority attention. Let's go a step further.
Brother Burrell mentioned that next year we will have in our hands approximately $1 trillion. America is for sale. If we could marshal our forces intellectually and financially, we could begin to address these problems and then put pressure on our government. Look at the tax dollars that they take from us that don't serve us. Suppose we could say to the government, give us a portion of our tax dollars back in a national treasury where we who think about the future of our people could come together and fulfill the biblical prophecy, rebuild the wasted cities, buy millions of acres of farmland, get into agribusiness, build your schools, your hospitals, do for yourself, and the world will honor you and respect you. But I have to say, none, listen to me carefully, none of our schools are training black children to be independent thinkers and builders of a world for ourselves and others. You are trained to come out of here and beg your former slave master for a job. And there are no jobs, so you might as well get ready to build.
Dr. Malvo, right quick.
Have presented President Obama with a clear-cut agenda. Now, for long times, we've talked about the black community not having an agenda, not having their issues. Well, for the first time since President Obama took office, a group of African-American civil rights leaders have presented a formal agenda to the president. The document was entitled A New Civil Rights Movement for Economic Empowerment and Justice. And the agenda includes 5 urgent goals. Goal number 1, achieving economic parity for African Americans. Goal number 2, promoting equality in education opportunity. Goal number 3, protecting and defending voting rights. Goal number 4, promoting a healthier nation by eliminating health care disparities. And goal number 5, achieving comprehensive criminal system reform.
Washington Journal continues.
Tavis Smiley, 10 years ago, this book came out, The Covenant with Black America, and this is 10 years later. First of all, what were you trying to get at 10 years ago?
First of all, good morning. Happy New Year. Good to see you as always, Peter. 10 years ago, we were in the midst of the Bush administration. In 2005, Katrina hit, and Kanye West famously said that George Bush doesn't care about black people. But whatever one thinks about what George Bush did or didn't do vis-a-vis Hurricane Katrina, those black folk who lost their precious lives in New Orleans, this book comes out in 2006 because black folk had basically had enough. I think we kind of felt like Fannie Lou Hamer. We were sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so we put together an agenda that laid out the top 10 issues of importance to African Americans and what could be done through this national plan of action to turn the tide against all those ills and ailments that were trying to take black America under. So everything from health to housing to criminal justice to the environment to the digital divide. The top 10 issues of importance to African Americans, of course, education, were in this book. The book comes out, makes history, goes to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, stayed there for many weeks at #1. And here we are, to your point, Peter, 10 years later, and one has to ask the question, based upon the agenda that was laid out 10 years ago, what progress has black America made a decade later? So the book out now is The Covenant with Black America 10 years later.
And once again, we are here talking about the Black agenda for the next administration, what is at stake. So I want you all to participate with me. I want you all to be interactive. I want you all to help me break Twitter today, okay? Maybe not yet. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, good, you can hear me. All right, so we're going to talk about something that we just talked about a moment ago. Issues of Black Lives Matter. That's a real issue right now. That's a real issue. And many people connect Black Lives Matter to the issue many decades ago of say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, Black power.
I don't want to lose this point about education, though, right? Because unfortunately, so much of the problem especially around mass incarceration, is started in schools where our children are treated like they are inherently criminal, right? And let's be honest, that's happening in all kinds of schools, right? That's happening in charter schools, it's happening in traditional public schools, it's happening all over the place, right? And our children are internalizing this idea that black is inherently wrong, right?
In comparison to the Ross community in Marin County, there is a 17-year disparity when we think about comparing it to white children. We need to invest significantly when we think about early education, when we think about ensuring from a healthy beginning standpoint that our mothers and our children have a healthy, strong, nurturing foundation upon which we can begin, because the return on investment is fairly significant.
So it's very important that we pay attention to mass incarceration and the mass criminalization of black people.
It's really important for us to begin. We are so afraid of the word socialism that we refuse to do economic planning. And every other industrialized country does economic planning.
Great, thank you. Next question.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Jordan. I'm a graduate of Delaware State University and HBCU, and Black Lives Matters is something I'm very passionate about. My question is for Ms. Packnett. It seems the Black Lives Matters movement focuses on police brutality, protesting, and hashtags, but seems not to focus on black economics, supporting black businesses, financial responsibility, healthy living, and supporting the black nuclear family, which is mother, father, and child. I just want to ask what are your thoughts about that and things we can do along those lines to progress this.
Thank you.
Say it again! Black Lives Matters movement focuses on police brutality, protesting, and hashtags, but seems not to focus on black economics, supporting black businesses, financial responsibility, healthy living, and supporting the black nuclear family, which is mother, father, and child. I just want to ask what are your thoughts about that and things we can do along those lines to progress this.
Thank you.
mass incarceration of black males, it's at epidemic proportions nationally. So then you say to yourself, well then, out of that experience, how can we be even worse? We have a very young African American population in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, third youngest of the 50 largest metro areas. We looked at the entire county and we found that over half of the African American men in the county in their 30s had been or were currently in state prison.
Most of my friends are incarcerated or in jail. Yeah, I'm the only one that's even here. I used to sell drugs on the street and stuff, and it was where sometimes I got caught by the police.
Welcome back, everybody. Now to part of our week-long coverage of A Stronger America, the Black Agenda. New analysis of the U.S. prison population finds more black men are incarcerated now than were enslaved in 1850. The figures are stunning. They are sobering, eye-opening numbers. The latest estimates by the Bureau of Justice putting the number of imprisoned African-American men at more than 846,000. While black men account for roughly 6.5% of the U.S. population, they make up 40.2% of the prison population.
Understand the nature of race, which is economics. If you build the first floor, is economic. Build your businesses and your industries. Control business and industry, and put that pulls in your money, and hold that money, and practice group economics with it. Arab and Asian money bounces 12 to 13 times what it leaves. Jewish money bounces 18 times. Black folk got to learn how to practice group economics. Black Americans spend every penny they get outside their own community.
Every social problem black people have can be traced back to our lack of business ownership. Because the people who run business run the world.
Because white supremacy means just that, white supremacy. You might be the football players, but we own the team. You might be the basketball player, but we run the games. You might be the scientist and the doctor, but we control the hospitals that you work for.
Being a worker is not a path to prosperity. Being a worker is simply a path to more work.
Last thing I do is get rid of a lot of our black leadership. Okay? All these black leaders in America now that head up our 2 or 3 major institutions keep talking about looking out for everybody but black folk. You tell them that day is over. Nobody's going to sell black folk anymore. The day of selling black folk over.